southern Mongolia, 70 million years ago. A vast river delta stretches out as far as the eye can see, the occasional tree projecting up into the air, shattering this otherwise level landscape. In the distance, you can see conifer forests, which are marked by dark green clumps of vegetation on the far side of the delta. Compact vegetation lines the riverbanks, and between them, wide, murky stretches of river spread out in a maze of directions. A thick cloud of black flies buzzes over the surface of the water, occasionally dissipated by the swift flash of a brightly colored bird or two. A pair of taviornis, Cretaceous birds perhaps related to geese and ducks, waddled by the riverbank, emerging from the dense vegetation to dabble in the shallow water. At the base of a nearby tree, a small dinosaur, the troodontid Zanabazar, scurries out of the undergrowth, ensnaring a small reptile in its sharp teeth. In the distance, you can make out a vast herd of various species of herbivorous dinosaur. A large group of Gallimimus is separated occasionally by a large Saurolophus, while the huge figures of the Titanosaur sauropod, Nemegtosaurus, loom in the background. The true star of these murky wetland swamps, a creature stranger than fiction, is yet to reveal itself, however. A thunderous bubbling from the deepest section of this stretch of river betrays the presence of a very large animal, and soon after, a large feather-covered hump slowly rises from the water, dripping with muddy river water and covered in green pondweed. The creature is plainly a dinosaur, but you might not instantly recognize it as one. When it is stood up, the river water is waist height on this animal, which walks on two powerful legs and possesses a pair of long, grasping arms, which, in this individual, sits a huge clump of pondweed. Atop its long neck sits a truly bizarre head, tipped with a long, flat, duck-like bill, measuring 10 meters in length from nose to tail, and over 3 meters in height up to its hump. This is Deinocheirus, a giant herbivorous theropod. In its mouth is a thick cluster of vegetation, pulled up from the bed of the slow-moving river. The creature grunts, appearing vaguely disinterested by your presence, before resuming its morning feeding session in the river. From further on down the river, several more Deinocheirus are making their presence known. Large adult females with hatchlings wander down to the riverbank to drink, while large males feed on the abundant aquatic plant life of this lush green land. Deinocheirus really is a bizarre specimen, even for a time and place where many species of dinosaur were blossoming out into bizarre new forms. Here we have a giant feathered theropod, adapted to a herbivorous lifestyle in the wetlands that would one day become the dry, barren Gobi Desert. The strangest feature of this dinosaur is without a doubt its bill. Round and flat, this bill would have acted very much like that of a modern-day duck or goose, allowing it to easily feed on the dense clumps of vegetation growing within and beside the rivers it calls home. This beak would have been covered in keratin, the same substance that makes up our very own fingernails and hair, and would have been tough. It is proposed that this dinosaur may have supplemented its herbivorous diet with a small helping of meat here and there, perhaps snapping up small vertebrates, such as fish, from the rivers it wallowed in. Traveling down the neck and towards the arms, we can see that Deinocheirus is the owner of some impressive forelimbs indeed. Next to Therizinosaurus, the strange long-clawed theropod, also native to Cretaceous Mongolia, Deinocheirus, possessed the longest forelimbs of any known bipedal dinosaur. These limbs each measured a massive 2.5 meters in length, and they were backed up by immense muscles. Scientists have been able to deduce that from various impressions and grooves in the arm bones, that this would have been a very strong dinosaur, perhaps capable of defending itself from large predators or bringing food sources into its mouth to eat. 3 claw-tipped fingers of equal lengths tipped each limb, which were likely used to rake the bottom of the rivers, allowing vegetation to be dug up and eaten. The torso of the dinosaur, despite being used to support a very powerful muscular animal, was relatively narrow and lightweight. Scientists have proposed that the vertebrae bones would have been supported by air sacs, allowing the giant animal to decrease its weight, helping it get around much easier than if it was bearing its full weight at all times. The pelvis of the dinosaur was much larger than that of its contemporaries, to allow it to support its 2 powerful legs beneath it. A long tapering tail rounded off the dinosaur, supporting the dinosaur in terms of balance, ensuring that it did not topple over forwards from being too top-heavy. Interestingly, Deinocheirus and its relatives are known to have been coated in a layer of pennaceous feathers, meaning that a stalk or quill was present running down the center of each, much like many modern birds. This could mean that the dinosaur's tail could have ended in a fan of feathers, which may have been used for display purposes. As many of Deinocheirus' relatives, the ornithomimids, were known to have had wing-like arrangements of feathers on the forearms, it is likely that this dinosaur may have also possessed similar structures, which would have made for a striking appearance in life. It is, of course, possible that some of the dinosaur's feathers may have been brightly colored in order to attract a mate, or to ward off predators and rival males. Scientists at this time still remain unsure about the exact color of Deinocheirus, as no sufficient evidence has been found to reveal this information. Due to its strange form and bizarre lifestyle, Deinocheirus has managed to find its way into popular media several times and has inspired interest and wonder amongst dinosaur fans for many years. The 2019 Japanese documentary, Amazing Dino World, made by NHK and CuriosityStream, was the first to publicize this dinosaur in its true form amongst popular media. In the show, it was portrayed as a gigantic pink and red spoonbill or flamingo-like animal, draped in vibrant shades of blue and white throughout its plumage. The series was praised for introducing lesser-known dinosaurs into the public eye, but it has been stated that it would be unlikely for Deinocheirus to possess this extremely colorful plumage pattern, as it would have made it very difficult for the dinosaur to evade detection from predators against the lush green backdrops of the Mongolian Nemegt River basin. In the series, Deinocheirus is depicted as a fierce defender of its hatchlings, guarding itself in combat from the giant Tyrannosaur Tarbosaurus. Deinocheirus was also depicted very recently in the 2022 Apple TV documentary Prehistoric Planet, narrated by David Attenborough. The series was praised as one of the best dinosaur documentaries ever made, due to its hyper-realistic representation of many familiar and obscure species of dinosaur throughout the end of the Cretaceous period. Deinocheirus was depicted in its humid riverine habitat, wading through a deep section of river and pulling vegetation up from the murky depths with its long arms to feed. The dinosaur was shown being mobbed by large clouds of biting insects which was causing it a great deal of irritation and pain. To combat this, the Deinocheirus individual in the show was shown rubbing up against a tree, using it as a scratching post, much like a modern-day large mammal, in order to target the areas its long arms could not scratch. The dinosaur in prehistoric planet was a much more believable black and brown colored, which blended in effectively against the dark shades of the river and deep greens of the surrounding plant life. A blue stripe of color was added towards the dinosaur's face, which would have potentially been used for display or intimidation. Speaking of Deinocheirus' fossil specimens, they are unfortunately rather few and far between. To this date, we only have 3 specimens of the giant theropod, and they have been the subject of much mystery, wonder, and debate over the decades, since it was first unearthed and described in July of 1965. It was Zofia Kielin-Jaworowska, a Polish paleontologist, that discovered the first remains of the mighty Deinocheirus at the Altan Ula 3 dig site in the Nemegt Formation in the middle of Mongolia's Gobi Desert. The first Deinocheirus fossils to be found were located on a small sandstone hill and didn't tell us too much about the creature's overall appearance. The fossils consisted of 2 complete arms and shoulders, minus the right hand's claws, as well as some vertebrae and ribs. Look back on an old dinosaur book from your childhood, and you may well find a now outdated section depicting Deinocheirus' colossal arms, with some mysterious text explaining that we don't know what the dinosaur looked like as a whole in real life. As a result of these huge arms, many books and scientific papers of days gone by would often refer to the find as one of the most bizarre in all paleontology. What did this dinosaur look like in real life? The dinosaur was determined to belong to a whole new family of theropod dinosaurs, as nothing like it had been found since. It really was a fantastic discovery. The creature was named Deinocheirus mirificus, which translates from Greek and Latin respectively as unusual horrible hand, as a result of the immense size and power of the dinosaur's limbs. Deinocheirus would remain cloaked in mystery and wonder for many years, until more specimens were finally announced in 2013. These discoveries were first announced in 2013 and were officially described in 2014. Scientists had dug up additional specimens of Deinocheirus as part of the 2006 Korea-Mongolia International Dinosaur Expedition. In the exact same site, the holotype fossil was discovered in 1965. Subsequently, in 2009, another specimen was dug up, a bit bigger than the holotype. Scientists determined that, due to the shape and form of the forearms, this was definitely another Deinocheirus specimen, but both finds had been damaged by fossil poachers, making it harder for scientists to work on them. This was likely a more complete specimen, but the poachers had taken the skull and much of the postcranial skeleton. This was still a big deal for scientists. There was a lot of new information here to deduce about Deinocheirus and the way it might have lived. Once these specimens were announced, rumor had it that there was a suspected Deinocheirus skull floating around the European black market, which had been spotted by French fossil trader Francois Esculier. He managed to obtain the fossils for himself and notified paleontologists. These fossilized remains consisted of a skull, hands, and feet, which had been dug up in the same location as the previous specimens by poachers, before being passed around buyers in Japan and Germany. the fossils were donated to the Royal Belgian Institute for Natural Scientists, where scientists were able to deduce that the fossils belonged to the existing specimen of Deinocheirus due to the size and color of the bones. When put together, and taking into consideration the other specimens of Deinocheirus that have been dug up, scientists now have what is essentially a complete idea of what the giant theropod looked like, and the end result could never have been predicted. Here we had a colossal, sail-backed, duck-billed dinosaur that was adapted to a life in humid river basins, in an area that would one day become a dry, barren desert. This dinosaur was part of a wider lineage that would contain giant carnivores, but this specimen subsisted largely on plant matter. Real life can often be stranger than fiction, it would seem. As discussed at the beginning of the video, the area that would one day become the Nemegt Fossil Formation has not always been as deserted as it is today. 70 million years ago, in the late Cretaceous period, the area was a large, humid river basin and supported a great variety of life that inhabited the area alongside Deinocheirus. The areas of the basin that weren't covered in river were likely marshy wetlands, which spread out for miles across great floodplains. Occasionally, large lakes were formed at the tips of the rivers, which would have supported a massive variety of life. Think of the modern-day diversity that can be found in a wetland, river, or lake, wherever you are in the world. This would have been very similar. The landscape of the time was also scattered with thick areas of trees, specifically conifers. Combined, these varying biomes provided so many food sources for the creatures of the late Cretaceous of Mongolia, enough to sustain many species of dinosaur. But who else lived alongside Deinocheirus in the Nemegt? How did our ornithomimid interact with its fellow river dwellers? Firstly, Deinocheirus was not the only ornithomimid dinosaur present in the area at the time, but it was by far the largest. In the nearby woodlands and on the vast swaths of floodplain would have strode large herds of Gallimimus, a famous, speedy, ostrich-like dinosaur. Gallimimus was a relatively common sight on the late Cretaceous Mongolian floodplains, and scientists have stumbled upon many near-complete specimens in their excavations. Alongside Deinocheirus, the most spectacular sight of the Nemegt would have been a solitary Therizinosaurus making its way through the conifer forests, perhaps coming down to the river to drink, and sharing a brief momentary interaction with a small herd of Deinocheirus. This gigantic herbivore actually resembled, albeit superficially, a Deinocheirus, and was another species of gigantic herbivorous theropod. This creature was as tall as a giraffe and possessed 3 long, formidable claws on each hand. Sprinting between the herds of ornithomimids in the forests may have been pairs of small oviraptorids known as ovimimus. These diminutive feathered theropods would have darted through the forest, perhaps picking off plant matter and insects from the conifers. Wait for night to fall on the Nemegt, however, and you might be lucky enough to catch a glimpse of several more sinister creatures. Small packs of Tokisaurus, a type of troodontid, burst from the trees to catch small nocturnal mammals and reptiles that make their homes amongst the conifers. The top predators of the Nemegt, and almost certainly the biggest danger to Deinocheirus on the floodplains, was the Tyrannosaur tarbosaurus. Deinocheirus arms have been found to have Tarbosaurus-inflicted bite marks on them, indicating that this 4-ton predator may have been able to make a hearty meal out of smaller or weaker individuals. These apex predators would have had a keen sense of smell, being able to locate potential prey items from a long distance. Alongside it, preying on small creatures, would have lived the Tyrannosaur bagaratin, which measured between 3 and 4 meters in length. This creature would have picked off the smaller ornithomimids perhaps, and maybe even hatchling Deinocheirises. A run-in with an adult would have put a swift end to an assailing bagaratin, however. It wasn't just the theropod dinosaurs that made a living from the abundant Nemegt Basin, however. Many other familiar groups of dinosaur had their own Mongolian representatives in the lush, humid wetland. Barsboldia and Saurolophus were two large species of Nemegt hadrosaurs, the latter almost matching Deinocheirus in size. Homalocephali and Prenocephali were two genuses of Pachycephalosaur native to the time and region, which may have lived in family groups out on the plains. Towering above all else in the Nemegt River basin was the gigantic sauropod known from the region, a 12-meter giant named Nemegtosaurus. This giant titanosaur would have roamed the lands in herds, feeding on the vegetation at the tops of the conifer trees that few other dinosaurs would have been able to reach. Many species of non-dinosaurian reptile also made the Nemegt Basin their home, living alongside our Deinocheirus. Soaring high above the rivers and lakes below, casting a huge black shadow on the ground, was an unnamed species of Asdarchid pterosaur, a creature from the same group of flying giants that contains the mighty Quetzalcoatlus and Hatzegopteryx. Still yet to be given an official name, or to be placed within an existing genus, this creature is known only from a few scattered fragments of neck vertebrae bones. And from this, scientists believe that it could have reached sizes of between 10 to 12 meters in length from wingtip to wingtip. For the time being, this creature has been given the intimidating nickname, the Mongol Giant. Back at water level, perhaps weaving in and out of Deinocheirus' long, powerful hind limbs to catch fish and small reptiles, was a crocodilomorph, a creature known as paralligator. This creature would have resembled a modern-day crocodile, a perfectly designed ambush predator that would lay in wait for prey to unknowingly pass by before meeting a swift and efficient end in trap-like jaws. Paralligator's diet may also have included many of the turtle species that shared the waters with both it and Deinocheirus. Many fragments of shells and bone have been discovered from nearby fossil beds that point to the presence of both aquatic and terrestrial turtles in the region. A lot of these species were small and unobtrusive, and would have resembled many species of turtle found in the waterways and lakes of modern-day Asia, as they drifted through the freshwater vegetation, snapping up fish and invertebrates. Although it wasn't a reptile, one species of small amphibian has also been unearthed from the Nemegt Formation. Altanulia was a tiny aquatic tetrapod, an amphibian that resembled a modern-day newt or salamander, only a few centimeters in length. These creatures would have drifted through the water, congregating in large numbers as they picked off ostracods and other invertebrates from the dark, muddy water. Deep in the murky waters of the Nemegt River basin swam a whole host of fish, from the small creatures that were possibly fed on by Deinocheirus to supplement its diet, to much larger, stranger creatures. In fact, vertebrae and scales of a bony fish, perhaps related to modern-day coelacanths, lungfishes, or sturgeons, have been found within one of the specimens of Deinocheirus that have been found in the region. One of the more peculiar species of fish that swam in these waters was a creature named Deinocheirus, which would have been a large species of strange bony fish related to modern-day Arapaima. The Arapaima is a very large species of freshwater fish native to the Amazon River, where it can be one of the most dangerous creatures in the ecosystem. Little is known about Deinocheirus, but this could have potentially been an unexpected, unseen danger to creatures swimming in or crossing the river and lakes of the Nemegt Basin. Supporting so many of these creatures were a wide variety of ostracods, tiny freshwater crustaceans that would have floated in the water, picking off tiny specks of food. Nearly 40 different species of ostracod have been found in fossils from the Nemegt Formation, indicating that they were a very common presence in the water and would have provided basic food for many of the region's animals. To top it off, the plant life of the region was diverse and plentiful. The Nemegt Formation was a green and verdant land, abundant in lush vegetation to support a wide range of massive herbivorous dinosaurs. The conifer forests provided shelter and food for the terrestrial creatures that roam the land. But there is plenty of evidence within those forests that other food sources were available, such as sporophyll plants, which were likely numerous on the floodplains and forest floor, providing food for many herbivorous dinosaurs. In the lakes and rivers, and likely providing the main food source for Deinocheirus, were various species of pondweed. Deinocheirus would have dragged these plants up from the sediment and the riverbanks in great quantities. This food must have been readily available to sustain a species of such large herbivore in an area inhabited by many similar creatures. The surface of the water was also coated in flowering aquatic plants known as duckweeds or water lentils, whose fruits and leaves would have provided additional food for these gigantic theropod dinosaurs. Deinocheirus has been placed in the family Deinocheiridae, which is one particular family of animals in the wider Ornithomimosaur grouping. When Deinocheirus was discovered, it was so unlike any other theropod dinosaur discovered thus far that it was given its own taxonomic family to distinguish it from other theropod groupings. This was all down to the bizarre arm structure. Nothing like it was known at this point. Several other dinosaurs accompany Deinocheirus in the family. In Asia, the Chinese Beishanlong and the Mongolian Gerudomimos. Despite the fact that all three of these dinosaurs lived throughout the Cretaceous, none of them would have ever encountered each other. Beishanlong was the earliest, which went extinct 100 million years ago. Gerudomimos came next, appearing on the scene 98 million years ago, and going extinct 83 million years ago. And the final known member was our gigantic Deinocheirus, which existed from 71 to 69 million years ago. In Mexico, meanwhile, on the other side of the world, lived Extinction, which existed from 71 to 73 million years ago. It was also a Dinocheirid and resembled Deinocheirus rather closely. This dinosaur was very closely related to Deinocheirus, in fact, and would have evolved from a common ancestor at a time when North America and Asia were connected. The continents eventually would drift apart, and the lineage would evolve into Deinocheirus and its Asian contemporaries, whilst the North American lineage would become Extinction. A similar process can be seen in modern-day marsupials. Typically, we associate Australia with this group of pouched mammals But various species are present in South America too. These creatures are echoes from a time when the two continents were not separated by a huge oceanic barrier. But what did these creatures look like? Let's start by taking a look at Paraxinosaurus, the Mexican Dinocheirid. Smaller than Deinocheirus, this creature would still have been a very impressive sight in its coastal plain habitat. It measured just short of 6 meters in length and looked like a smaller, more slender Deinocheirus, still covered in a layer of shaggy feathers. This dinosaur lacked the huge, hump-like spinal sail possessed by its cousin and would have shared the area with various species of ceratopsian, hadrosaur, and ornithomimid dinosaurs. Garudamimus, Deinocheirus' Mongolian relative, was smaller and more slender still. It bore an appearance much more similar to classic ornithomimid dinosaurs, such as Gallimimus or Struthiomimus. Again covered in a thick layer of feathers, this was an ostrich-like dinosaur, 4 meters in length from nose to tail, that would have been capable of great speeds, as it congregated in herds across the semi-arid river basins of Cretaceous Mongolia. Garudamimus was dug up in the Nemegt Formation of Mongolia, an area famed for its great diversity of dinosaur life. Alongside this relatively little Dinocheirid would have lived Electrosaurus, Graciloceratops, and Segnosaurus, among many others. Finally, let's take a look at Beishanlong, the earliest, most basal Dinocheirid dinosaur, which was discovered in the early Cretaceous rocks of China. Despite measuring a little over 2 meters tall in height, this was a very large dinosaur, and its tapering, slender form would have stretched to over 6 meters in length from nose to tail tip. It resembled something between the stereotypical ornithomimosaur form and the bizarre Dinocheirid form, bearing an uncanny appearance to both types of dinosaur. Like Deinocheirus, this was a robust, strong animal with long arms and large muscles. The dinosaur was named in 2009, and in the description of the dinosaur, it was noted that it was already of considerable size and was still growing at the time it died. This creature likely inhabited forested wetlands and river systems that ran through ancient China, leading an omnivorous lifestyle of feeding on plant matter and small invertebrates. The closest relation to the Deinocheirids, outside of the ornithomimid dinosaurs, are the Maniraptorans, a huge clade of theropod dinosaurs, which include all of the classic raptor dinosaurs and more. In this group can be found such well-known and classic groups such as the Dromaeosaurs, Therizinosaurs, Oviraptorosaurs, Alvarezsaurs, Troodontids, and all modern-day birds. It is not currently known why exactly Deinocheirus disappeared from this world, eventually becoming extinct. We do know that Deinocheirus became extinct roughly around 69 million years ago, not too long relatively before the eventual extinction of all non-avian dinosaurs. In situations like these, we can only speculate. Perhaps natural disasters took their toll on the species, or perhaps the food sources that Deinocheirus relied upon disappeared due to the climate changes toward the end of the Cretaceous period. Climate change may have also resulted in the loss of the riverine habitat that Deinocheirus relied so heavily upon to find food. Or perhaps it could just not adapt to other changing features within the environment. It is a mystery that may one day perhaps be resolved by science. But until then, we can only wonder what happened to these great creatures of the vast Mongolian floodplains. Deinocheirus is an animal whose natural history story is perhaps stranger than fiction itself. Steeped in mystery and wonder, this is a creature that many dinosaur enthusiasts found themselves growing up with, and the initial tale of scientific confusion conjured up so many possibilities in the mind of children and adults alike. Prior to the revelations in Deinocheirus' appearance, nobody could really predict what this dinosaur looked like. Obviously, it was a theropod dinosaur, based on the shape of the arms and hands. But even they were unlike anything scientists had unearthed at that point in time. When the truth was finally revealed, it did not disappoint. It was almost as though the dreams of those dinosaur enthusiasts had come true. Who could have predicted that at one point in our planet's history, something this bizarre, this unusual, this otherworldly could have existed on it? Mongolia is known for its vast array of strange dinosaurs, but even Deinocheirus pushes the limits. This creature's strange tale is one of almost fictional mystery, something that can be regaled and retold again and again to inspire interest not only in dinosaurs, but in our natural world as a whole. The idea of a gigantic duck-billed theropod dinosaur inhabiting the humid lakes and waterways in an area of planet Earth so synonymous with modern-day open plains and dry deserts is something that can surely inspire the imaginations of all of us.